Good evening, America, and welcome to New York Live. This is Melissa Smith reporting from New York City on December 31st, 1979, and we are going to be looking back on the decade.
Hello, and my name is Amy Walker. So, Melissa, what would you say your favorite part of the 70s was?
My favorite memory of the 70s is probably on April 22nd, 1970, when we had the first Earth Day Festival.
It's great that that day set a precedent for the rest of the years to follow. My favorite day was when Walt Disney World opened in Orlando, Florida on October 1st, 1971. This was monumental because Walt Disney World now covered coast to coast.
This also created a new kind of good energy for the people.
It's nice to think of the happy times that occurred, but we also can't forget about the tragic times as well.
Stay with us for the next hour as we look back on the decade and look at our favorite highlights.
But first, we'd like to thank one of our sponsors from tonight's show.
My baloney has a first name, it's O-S-C-A-R. My baloney has a second name, it's M-A-Y-E-R. Oh, I love to eat it every day, and if you ask me why, I'll say, 'cause Oscar Mayer has a way with B-O-L-O-G-N-A.
Oscar Mayer, the first name in Bologna.
How's that?
70 started off with Nixon being newly inaugurated and in the heat of the Vietnam War.
Nixon was a thoughtful expertise when it came to foreign affairs, and he was determined to win the war.
But in the end, was the war really worth fighting?
That's a topic for later.
Well, Nixon really wanted the war to end because he knew that he didn't have a lot of public support. So, on April 29th, 1970, he made the decision, without Congress's approval, to have American troops join the South Vietnamese and Cambodia to take out enemy sanctuaries.
The public did not agree with Nixon's action, and they responded with protests with doing arson, rock throwing, and window smashing.
Also, the bitter gap between the Doves, who wanted the war to end, and the Hawks, a group of people who did not want the war to end, deepened.
More often than not, we saw these Doves starting protests throughout the country despite their names.
In fact, over 100,000 college students gathered at the Kent State campus in Ohio for a protest. After a police attempt to control the chaos, a National Guard shot into the crowd.
Unfortunately, 4 students were killed and 9 wounded during the protest, which ignited a fire that reached over 450 campuses across the nation and caused some schools to shut down as the students protested.
And the chaos continued in March of 1971 when the Pentagon Papers, which was a secret of the Department of Defense, which was a study of the military involvement in Vietnam, was released.
This happened because military analyst Daniel Ellsberg, who was working on the study, began opposing the war and wanted the public to know the information.
The release of the papers caused an international uproar as the U.S. tried to block the publication of the papers but had little to no success.
Pentagon Papers were a major problem for the U.S. government because it confirmed American suspicion about the U.S. government being involved in building up the conflict with Vietnam, especially the Gulf of Tonkin.
Nixon went to China and Moscow in 1972, and his 2 peaceful visits to these 2 communist powers and the agreements that were made brought an era of relaxed peace to the citizens.
But even with all these meetings with communist powers, Nixon still remained heavily anti-communist.
By 1973, the casualties of the U.S. rose to about 58,000, and the cost brought the U.S. to the point where their only option was to withdraw from the war.
Although the war officially ended in 1973, its effects will definitely still linger on.
Now let us take a moment of silence for those who have fallen during the Vietnam War.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch.
We have Liz Banks in Washington, D.C. to talk about President Nixon's resignation.
I'm here with Jeffrey Allen, and he knows very well what happened to our 37th president.
Oh, well, on August 1974, Nixon announced his resignation from presidency after he knows that an impeachment was close to him.
And what caused these sudden, abrupt feelings of change towards Nixon?
The Watergate scandal started as a result of the break of the Democrats' National Committee at the headquarters Watergate on June 7th, 1972.
And so who was it that broke in?
It was traced to the president, re-election committee, and afterwards, quite a few officials resigned after they heard about the aftermath, and some convicted or even trying to cover up the scandal.
And how did Nixon respond to this?
He denied involvement, but the court urged him to give off his conversations and his hidden evidence that he claimed himself to have it.
So, who became president after Nixon?
I think it's House Minority Leader Gerald Ford. became president after Congress approved.
That was definitely a turbulent time for the American political scene after the scandal. Well, thank you for being here with me,
You're
Jeffrey
welcome.
Allen. Now back to New York.
All right, let's hear from one of our sponsors.
I drink Dr. Pepper and I'm proud. I used to be alone in a crowd, but now you look around these days, there seems to be a Dr. Pepper craze. I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper, we're a pepper, wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper, if you drink Dr. Pepper, you're a pepper too. Us peppers are an interesting breed, an original taste is what we need. Ask any pepper and he'll say, only Dr. Pepper tastes that way. I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper, we're a pepper, wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper, we're a pepper, wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? Be a pepper, drink Dr. Pepper. Come on! Be a pepper, drink Dr. Pepper. Right. Be a pepper, drink Dr. Pepper.
Hello and welcome back to New York Live. Now on to discuss the major inventions that made their first debut in the 70s.
And here's Grace Little reporting from Chicago.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm here with Tony Jackson. So, what do you think were the most groundbreaking inventions that happened in the last decade?
Well, the floppy disk invented by Alan Shugart was a breakthrough for technology, as well as the first videocast recorder invented in 1971.
Yes, the video cassette was groundbreaking because it forever changed how people could watch videos right in the comfort of their own home.
Yes. In 1973, a major controversial topic arose as gene splicing and genetic modification of organism was invented.
The genetic modification will forever change America's food supply.
In 1977, Raymond D. DeMartin produced the first full body image for an MRI.
The following year, the medical advancement, the artificial heart, Jarvik 7, was invented by Robert Jarvik.
We also can't forget that cell phones were invented on 1979. Yeah!
The inventions of the 70s were monumental because they built a foundation for the years to come. Well, thank you, Tony, for being with us, and take care. Now back to Melissa and Amy.
Bye!
Thank you, Grace Little.
A New Age movement swept the nation as people began to look for answers spiritually.
These New Age groups provided a basis for a full spiritual life, with religious study and learning through spiritual practice and self-discipline.
Along with this New Age movement, the white-dominated culture began accepting blacks more often.
The daily impact of television helped integrate blacks more into society because they were frequently a part of shows and commercials.
Also, the women's rights movement rolled in from the 60s into the 70s.
In August 1970, there was a nationwide wave of women's strike for equality.
This prompted the proposal of the Equal Rights Amendment, but it did not get ratified due to 8 votes too short.
A wave of women began applying for law school, medical school, and business schools in the early 1970s.
Women also began fighting for the right to abortion and contraceptives.
The Roe v. Wade case was a case against Supreme Court dealing with abortion.
Texan Jane Woe decided to challenge the Texas law regarding abortions to be illegal unless the mother's life was in danger.
After bringing attention to the case, it slowly made its way to the Supreme Court.
After 2 years, the court decided to make the law invalidated with a vote of 7-2.
No state now could prohibit abortion during the first 3 months of pregnancy.
By the late 1970s, women's gains included outlawing of gender discrimination in college sports and education, banning of employment discrimination against pregnant women, legalization of birth control and abortion, and the establishment of irreconcilable differences, which included divorce and equal property rights distribution.
It's great to look back and see how much improvement has been made in fighting for women's rights.
Women also had a breakthrough in fashion.
Let's take a moment to walk through these trends.
Whoa, she looks like a cool cat.
Now here you go again. You say you want your freedom. Well, who am I to keep you down? It's only right that you should play the way you feel it. But listen carefully to the sound of your loneliness, like a heartbeat drives you mad. In the stillness of remembering what you had and what you lost.
Juicy.
And what you had, and what you lost. Oh, thunder only happens when it's raining. Players only love you when they're playing.
Ooh, that's rad.
They will come and they will go. When the rain washes you clean, you know.
Groovy.
Now here I go again. I see the crystal vision. I keep my visions to myself. It's only me who wants to wrap around your dreams and have you any dreams you like yourself. Dreams of loneliness, like a heartbeat drives you mad. In the stillness of remembering what you.
It wasn't only about fashion trends in the 70s.
Environmentalism was a trend that surged in the 70s as people became more aware of the carbon footprint on the earth.
The main cause of this surge was the 1969 Santa Barbara oil spill.
Another trend that arose in the 70s was in-home technology.
Video games became popular along with in-home computers. This changed the way people spent their leisure time forever.
In-home, televisions also had a great impact on sports. 1970 brought the beginning of Monday Night Football.
Men would gather every Friday night to watch the game.
The Pittsburgh Steelers won nearly half the Super Bowls in the 70s.
In 1972, Germany held the Summer Olympics where Mark Spitz, a U.S. swimmer, won 7 gold medals in one day.
Wow, what a cool cat.
Tonight we have a special guest to tell us about his experience with a terrorist attack at the Munich Olympics.
Our co-host will be reporting with him live from Germany.
But first, a word from one of our sponsors.
What's this stuff? Some cereal. It's supposed to be good for you. Did you try it? I'm not gonna try it. You try it. I'm not gonna try it. Let's get Mikey. Yeah. He won't eat it. He hates everything. He likes it. Hey, Mikey.
When you bring life home, don't tell the kids it's one of those nutritional cereals you've been trying to get them to eat. You're the only one who has to know.
Now on to you, Kat Rivers.
Hello, I'm here with Adolf Swartz from Germany to talk to us about the Munich Olympic tragedy.
While I was waiting for a bus, a police officer came up and talked to me about what just happened in the massacre.
And what did the police officer say?
He said the Germans refused to satisfy the Palestinian demand for releasing 234 prisoners from Israel prisons. After this, a stalemate occurred with the terrorists at the airport.
Wow, this must have been a scary moment for everyone.
The terrorists caught on to the German sniper trap, but eventually the terrorists know it was the end. The terrorists killed the 9 hostages, and the remaining terrorists were caught by the Germans.
Did any of the terrorists escape?
There are 3 killed and 3 that were taken into custody, but released 2 months later when two other Black September members hijacked a plane and demanded their release.
I can't imagine witnessing all this chaos. It's too bad those hostages couldn't have been saved.
Yeah, and ironic since Germany wanted to create a carefree and peaceful Olympic Games. Kind of irony.
Well, thank you, Adolf, for being with us tonight and telling us about your experience. Now back to New York.
Now for comedy. The 70s brought new forms of comedy with skits and improvisation. Second City and the Groundlings stole the show.
Stand-up comedy was also tackled by Today Youth.
You can't forget about the NPR, Melissa.
Oh yes, thanks Amy. National Public Radio was launched in 1970, which was a publicity-funded radio station which served the counterpart Doe Television PBS.
A new type of radio format was introduced in the early 70s. The first oldies station went on air.
The baby boomers generation were now adults and were nostalgic for the rock music they had grown up listening to.
Let us talk to one of our audience members and ask what their favorite musicians were from the decade.
All right, here is Mike Phillips. Who was your favorite?
Hi. So my favorite is Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin. Journey, Fleetwood Mac, Boston were all popular and many people enjoyed seeing them perform. Blues rock, hard rock, reggae, hip hop, and classic were popular genres.
In 1978, for the very first time, the FM listeners surpassed the AM listeners. There was primarily relaxing and dancing music.
People enjoyed their music because they were tired of all the violence from the 60s and used dancing as an escape.
Yes, that's what allowed for the disco movement to emerge.
The dancing in the dancing club allowed people to let loose and get out the frustrations against political decisions.
All right, well, thank you, Mike, for your time.
Thank you.
Dinner theaters were at the peak of their popularity in the 70s, as people enjoyed watching a show and enjoying their dinner at the same time.
In 1976, after the VCR was successfully on the market, 20th Century Fox released 50 movies on video. Paramount released their entire collection, and Columbia Pictures released 20.
1976 was also the year of the 38th presidential elections. Jimmy Carter beat former President Gerald Ford by 2% of the vote.
Yeah, well, Carter was a better fit. He was the former governor of Georgia and had done a terrific job with their political standings.
Carter started in January of 1977 and promised he would restore morality to our foreign policy and nation at home that was still up in chaos after the Vietnam War.
Also, that summer, about 200,000 protesters marched through the streets of San Francisco protesting Anita Bryant's anti-gay protesters.
Although the gay and lesbians still remain a minority, the acceptance of them is growing.
Gays and lesbians were not the only minorities that made an impact on the 70s.
People's Temple, a cult led by Jim Jones, made its way to the news screens multiple times this decade, despite their effort to be secret.
Jim Jones had a very Pentecostal beliefs that attracted many African Americans.
They focused mostly on progressive views and racial equality.
By the mid-70s, People's Temple dominations popped up in San Francisco and LA.
In 1977, New West magazine published a copy to expose Jim Jones and his cult.
He decided to move his cult to South America. Congressman Leo Ryan flew to South America to meet with Jim Jones. However, him and the cult shot and killed the congressman.
Knowing that they would be held accountable, Jones and his cult went out with a bang. They committed a mass suicide. Over 900 members of People's Temple drank poisoned Kool-Aid, and those who refused were held at gunpoint.
What a tragedy.
Yes.
Now to end on a lighter note, let's cut to Jessica Gale in Cleveland, Ohio.
Thanks, Melissa. This is Jessica Gale reporting from the food capital of the U.S. I'm here with Franco, a food enthusiast, to discuss his favorite dishes of this decade.
Okay, so as an aspiring chef, Julia Child and her cookbook has been my role model this last decade.
What are some of your favorite dishes?
I think my favorite dishes is her beef brisket recipe because it's delicious and convenient because of my new crock pot.
Oh yes, the crockpot has made an in-home cooking much more accessible and convenient, especially for those who work long hours.
Yeah, my favorite part is that I can put together my dish in the morning and it will be ready when I got home. It's really good.
Thank you, Franco, for your insight. Take care.
Okay.
Back to Melissa in New York.
Bye-bye.
All right, thanks, Jessica.
Well, folks, this has been a great past decade, and I'm glad we were all part of it.
Happy New Year and be safe, cool cats.